Hey, everybody, welcome back to Odd and Untold. This week, my guest is Bigfoot enthusiast, Bigfoot researcher, Scott Perry. And he's also a friend of mine. So, Scott, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, anytime, man. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time. We were just kind of talking off air about how we met back, what was it, November of 2020?
Yeah, right before Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember it was November. It was cold. We were up in the Adirondacks, Paoli Paseco Road, and you came up and met up with Josh Diaz and I. Josh, who was on the show last week, and you were just saying we were talking around the campfire in like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
We were talking talking Bigfoot mostly, and I think we got into some other stuff, UFOs or whatever. But yeah. So and I think we'd even spoken at the time or like shortly after. We were just like, man, we should have recorded that, or we should have a podcast. And
that's when I think we got the ball rolling and started kicking it around, like the spark kind of ignited that night.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember I looked into it just to kind of see if I could get it going. And this is in, kind of the midst of the pandemic, and everything I was researching was kind of leading me to dead ends. And I was like, I don't know if we can do this. Like my computer at the time was very old. I didn't really have the technology to do it. And, I was so focused on trying to get my other website back up and not back up and running, but back in episode 3, I kind of explained how my site kind of got delisted off of Google. And I went from, 20,000 hits a month down to like 400 or 500 hits, a month. Yeah. And so that was really my focus. And then, I spoke to my wife and she was just like, you got to, blogs are kind of dying. You got to get on Instagram, you got to get on, YouTube and podcasts. And I was like, well, Scott and Josh and I were talking about that, and we, maybe I should kind of pivot. So I did. And of course, like you and Josh, like the first 2 guys I reached out to, and I was like, we got to do some regular shows. And so here we are. So,
yeah. And you kind of put us behind the 8 ball, because here we are following up Seth Breedlove. Thanks. Yeah, that's you should have the warm-up group up first before you have the headliner, but we were kind of
I should have, but Seth was like the Holy Grail there. I needed to talk to Seth, and for me it was like just kind of breaking that barrier. If I could talk to Seth, I could talk to anybody. So
sure.
And you guys are friends, and we had great conversations. So I definitely wanted to talk to you about Bigfoot and anything else you want to talk about tonight. The conversation we had in the woods that night, 4 hours flew by. We talked about a lot of stuff. One thing I wanted to touch on with you, and I was actually going to do a blog post about this before the podcast was even a twinkle in my eye, because when you and I first met or started talking, even online, probably before we even actually met in person, we were talking about Bigfoot road crossings. And that was something that I've always read about. It's on all the shows. A lot of witnesses have these nighttime kind of road crossings, and you were probably the first person who mentioned it to me and like really brought it up as like something that not that it bothered you, but like you had real questions about it. So I definitely wanted to talk to you about that.
Sure.
Like, what are your thoughts on Bigfoot road crossings?
Well, this is something that I even spoke with Will Jevening about, because just you hear endless number of accounts and sightings. You hear roadside crossings, and obviously it's a thing, because that's where the majority of the sightings come. The fleeting glimpse of it crossing the road.
Right.
Now, the thing that always got me, what was just odd about all that, and I'm not denying, I'm not questioning the fact of any of it, but it just seems odd that as smart as these things are supposed to be, and most likely are, you'd think that they'd be smarter than a deer or any other wild animal out in the woods. And especially, most of these sightings are out on a country road, miles from nowhere, no houses, no lights, no nothing, where you could hear a car coming for miles. Okay. Why in the world do they wait for the car to get within sighting distance to cross the road? You'd think that they would sit there, and if they knew the car was coming, they'd just wait. And, if they, as elusive and, supposedly want to be unseen as, we think they are, why wait till the car comes up within sighting distance and walk across the road in front of it? That one I don't get, and I brought that up, like I said, with Will Jevening, And that's just a head scratch. I mean, it just continues to tell you how much you think you start to know about these things, and it's just down the rabbit hole with it don't make any sense. One step ahead, two steps back. Why? If they don't want to be seen, they want to remain hidden, the elusive being that they're supposed to be, why in the world would they do that?
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And it's one of those things that like kind of tickles you in the back of the brain. You don't really think about it much, or I never did, and I don't think a lot of people do, because you hear these stories mentioned and not a lot of people sort of try to poke holes in it like you're doing. And yeah, I mean, obviously there's roadkill. You see all sorts of animals on the side of the road getting hit, deer and raccoons and squirrels. But like you said, these things are supposed to be much more intelligent. They're elusive. You can't get a photo of them. You can't track them. You can't find them. But yet so many people will be saying they're driving down the road at night and their headlights illuminate this thing and it's upright and it's ape-like and it's running across the road. There's even accounts of people hitting these things. You hear people.
That's just it. They're not, they're not always giving them, 50 yards distance before they do it. People, like you said, hitting them or coming close to hitting them or swerving to miss them or, winding up in a ditch, missing them. Yeah, you're right. It's mind blowing.
Right. And so it's an interesting aspect to the phenomenon that these things seem to be able to elude cameras and guns and just they're not seen too often. Yet I feel like I don't know the percentage. I haven't done any studies on it. I don't know if anybody has. I don't know what the percentage is, but like so many people, there's tons of witness accounts where there's these nighttime roadside crossings. And like you said, if these things are hearing the engines, seeing the headlights, why are they darting out right as the car gets there? You'd think they just kind of hang out, wait for the car to pass, and then go much sooner if they have to cross. And I understand. I mean, I've heard reports of them like chasing a deer.
Yeah.
And you're sort of saying, okay, if this thing's hungry and it's just kind of got this tunnel vision where it's focused on this deer and it's not really hearing the car coming, that's one thing. But I can't believe that all of these roadside crossings are always of this creature trying to catch its prey.
Right. And exactly like you said, I mean, I don't know the percentages, I'm not that into the mathematics of it all, but I do know that the majority of all sightings are road crossing or roadside, that someone can at least see them out of the vehicle window going by or crossing the road in front of them or whatever.
Right. And, I mean, you can make the case for misidentifications.
Oh, sure.
But, that only covers so much, I think, there's you saw a bear or you saw a moose or you saw whatever. And I tend to agree with that. For the majority of sightings. I think a lot of these things are probably misidentifications.
Sure.
I don't think all of them are. I think, you have a schmuck like me from the city, kind of driving in some area they're not familiar with wildlife they're not familiar with, and you see something and it's at a certain angle and it's the middle of the night and maybe you've had a drink or two and you're tired and it kind of looks like Bigfoot. But then you have other people who live in these areas, who've been hunting in these areas, who are very familiar with this wildlife, and that's much harder to discount.
Well, it's just the same thing. It's like, I just say if you had, say, and again, I don't know the total number of sightings, but it's in the in the uppers of thousands and thousands. All right, say 99% of the sightings that are reported are misidentification, hoaxes, just flat out lies or whatever.
Right.
Okay, 99%. There's still 1% that they can't disprove, and that 1% out of all those numbers is a staggering amount. Even if it's just 1%, that 1% right there is more than enough, to keep the conversation going, obviously, because out of the thousands and thousands all over the years, all over the country and places like that, 1% that they can't, just can't debunk, like I said, even if 99% were hoaxes, misidentification, or just flat out fabricated stories, 1% is still a ton of credible sightings.
Right. And again, I think if people are going to hoax this, they're gonna hoax footprints, they're gonna hoax a photo. I don't know why anybody would hoax a story. Why is anyone going to, unless they're getting paid or unless they're getting on TV, which I could kind of see that, but hoaxing usually involves some sort of, snickering behind the scenes and be like, haha, I fooled them, and look, I made these Bigfoot prints and people are casting them. And, to tell a story, I don't think you're really hurting anybody at that point. So I think if you're saying that you saw something and that's it, you saw it out of the, you don't have a photo, you don't have any vocalizations on audio recordings, you don't have any footprints. If you're just saying I saw something, I think that's a little bit more credible than the footprints, or which are easily hoaxed.
Footprints are getting harder and harder just because with the technology, and Meldrum brought between Jimmy Chilcott, the crime investigator out of Texas, and Meldrum, obviously, in the past 15 years or so since he's come across the scene. Right. The footprints have just become something that you just don't go out with your wooden stompers, and just waddle around in the wood, because now you have the gate, you have the mid-tarsal break, you have the dermal ridges. You know what I mean? You have, there's like from years ago, they had what was a cripple foot, mm-hmm. No one could, even at today, no one could replicate, that kind of injury to match up, nobody could do it. The experts have already said that. So it's just the way technology and just the forensics and everything has gotten better every year. To go out there and just make big footprints in this, that's a lost art, and not too many people are going to get away with that anymore.
Right, and that's that's fascinating stuff to me. Is the the dermal ridges and the, like you said, the mid-tarsal break and cripple foot. And when you start having anthropologists sort of come in and say, like Dr. Meldrum, yeah, Chilcott is awesome. I mean, he does great work with the dermal ridges. To have actual scientists come in, not these weekend warriors, or not to just because I am one of them. Right. I'm a weekend warrior sort of thing. I don't have any speciality in this. But to hear these guys kind of come into it and say these dermal ridges cannot be faked, like this is like, or if they are faked, it was faked by another anthropologist or another, fingerprint specialist, which, like, what are the odds of that?
And who and why? Yeah, if you're someone like that, you got more things to worry about in the world than doing something like that.
Right. And again, you would think that someone in that capacity, an anthropologist or a criminologist or somebody like that who is hoaxing these, would eventually come out and be like, look, here's the hoax. I did mm-hmm. this. I made these dermal ridges that these guys believe, but it was really me. And here's how I did it. And you would think that's why they'd be doing it. So again, like why hoax something and then have no follow-up? That to me is kind of, if we're in the woods and you guys are sleeping and I go around our camp and I'm kind of like stomping footprints and you guys wake up the next morning like, oh shit, there's, Bigfoot was here last night. And then I just start laughing, right. That's the satisfying part of the hoax. Like if you're never getting that satisfaction, and again, I'm not saying that hoaxes never happen, right? But to say that most of the stuff is hoax, I don't believe. I mean, a lot of this stuff happens so deep in the woods, like the chances of anyone even stumbling upon it are infinitesimal. So again, it makes me question why would anybody even hoax it?
Yeah, it's such it is a catch-22 a lot, because you have a lot of these sightings are becoming closer and closer to civilization, for whatever reason, whether, I've heard different things that, obviously their habitat is shrinking with, human population, going urban sprawl or whatever.
Right.
Or the fact that, this is my sidekick.
That's
here. Fine. Or the fact that the population is, a lot of, credible people that I've listened to have said that the population really is exploding,
right.
Especially down south. So, it's kind of hard to, think that, someone's doing something out in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't work that way anymore. Like you said, because the old hoaxers, it just, they had their day in the sun, and now even people like us, like me, could probably look at something and tell you if it's hoax or not.
Right.
I couldn't tell you if it's true unless I actually seen the thing making the tracks. I would never be able to say yes, it is, but I definitely could be able to say no, it's not. I mean,
Right.
just with what we've learned, in these past, since we'll say the age of the internet, anyway.
Right. Right.
You know.
So something you just said prompted something in me, because I've had this discussion with Josh and tree knocks.
Yeah.
And because you mentioned something about like you haven't seen this thing, make the footprints. And for me, the whole tree knock thing is interesting because, again, like no one's ever seen, not that I know of, you don't really hear stories of somebody seeing a Bigfoot, taking a branch or
Exactly. Yeah.
So you hear about these tree knocks, and yes, you can assume like, okay, well, it's almost like the rock throwing. Like, what other animal in the woods can throw a rock at you?
Right.
It's going to be a person, or it's going to be Bigfoot. It's going to be something with an opposable thumb. Like if you're getting rocks like legit thrown at you, it's a person or a Bigfoot. And I got a story about that something happened to my wife with a rock throwing incident. And I'll circle back to that. But the tree knocks, that always interested in me, because again, you can sort of say, well, okay, what can make a tree knock? It's a person, it's a Bigfoot. Could just be branches falling out of trees. It could be again, in the winter, you have trees when the temperature changes. It doesn't even have to be in the winter. It could be in the summer. The temperature drops a lot. The wood is going to kind of crack and pop.
And the sap expands and contracts. Yeah,
exactly. So if you're not seeing the actual animal do this, if you're not seeing a Bigfoot knock on the trees, then what's to say that it's a Bigfoot? And another thing I always find funny is that a lot of this stuff kind of happens in these Bigfoot hotspot areas. So you kind of have an investigator or a group will go into the woods and they're banging on trees and they're yelling, and then they get a response from a couple of miles away.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting bangs and they're getting yells, and it's like, well, is that Bigfoot or is that another group of investigators like you?
That's a great point, because I don't put a whole lot of faith. Finding Bigfoot brought in the whole tree knocking stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, that I can't bash them 100% because they brought the subject to light. You know what I mean? And I believe that the DFRO's intentions and moneymaker is what a wacko he is. I mean, the original intentions, I believe, were really good. To bring public attention to this. Okay, going out there banging on trees, hooting and hollering, clacking rocks. Every broken branch in the wood is a structure. I just everything that I've heard, and the different people with greater knowledge than me. I'm not going to say experts, anybody, but with much greater knowledge than myself. I don't put a lot of faith in the structures or the tree knocks, because just like you said, everybody and their brothers out there, these researchers bring their own little baseball bat with them, a little tire thumper. And we've all been out there. If you take 6 swings at a tree, 2 of them might sound good, and you're going to break the branch, and it sounds like crap. The only thing that I ever heard, that, like you said, no one's ever seen a Bigfoot banging on a tree with a stick.
Right.
Boy, this was a long time ago, years ago. An encounter that I heard, and I can't even tell you where in the country it was, but someone apparently, witnessed one of these things slapping a tree with an open hand, and it sounded just like what people are describing as tree knocks.
Mm-hmm.
And come to find out what the thing was doing, it was wailing on a tree to get a raccoon out that was up inside it, and it was a snack.
Right.
But I just think, and that's just, it's just every show that you watch now, you got tree knocks, all right, and then you got whoops and you got whistles, and I'm not saying that it's not saying that any of this couldn't be done, but there's so much emphasis. That's the very first thing anybody do. I enjoy a lot of the ghost shows and the Bigfoot shows. I don't even watch, because some of it just to get, and I'm probably wrong for this, but I watched Jack Osborne's latest one there with Bigfoot, and he went out with Jay Muse. What was Muse from Jay and Silent Bob.
Oh yes,
Remember
yes.
the movie?
Yep.
And I mean, I kind of like Jack as just a personality, because he's kind of just a frumpy old dude like I am, and he's not a rock star like his father, but
Right.
he still has the means to do what you and I wish we could do for a living.
Yeah, exactly.
And get paid that. But the first thing that they're out doing, the very first thing, they're call blasting. And what are you call blasting? I mean, what are you expecting to, some of this times you might be careful what you wish for.
Right.
Because you're putting stuff out there, you don't know what you're calling in, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what these supposed tree knocks mean, but you've seen it on TV. So this guy did it, so we're all going to go out there, bang on trees, we're going to we're going to howl, we're going to call blast the Ohio howl. Even if you're in Oregon, you're going to call blast the Ohio howl, which is these are different species of everything. You don't even know what you're doing.
Right.
Like I said, be careful what you wish for. It may be all legit. I don't know. But it just seems to me, I don't know. It gets to be now. It's typecast that every Bigfoot you go out there, you got your parabolic dish, you got your call blaster, and you got your little tree beater, and that's what you need to be. Oh, you got to have your your casting material too, in case you come across the track.
Right.
And that's your Bigfoot kit 101.
Right.
And it's the same, like you were saying. Everybody's out there howling, and then from 2 miles away you hear something. What is that? Well, I'm going to say like Salt Fork State Park, for instance. That's in Ohio. That's been like the Bigfoot hotspot for a lot of years. Now, Salt Fork isn't like the Olympic Peninsula. All right, it's tiny compared to that. How many times are these guys beating on trees and whooping and yelling and getting response from another party, a mile and a half away on a quiet night? These guys are all triangulated and they're all talking to each other, think they're all talking to Bigfoot.
Exactly. And that's what concerns me, is that, like you said, you go to the Olympic Peninsula, there's nobody out there. You go up to Alaska, you're not going to run into this, but you go to Salt Fork. I just brain fart there. Yeah. But you go to a populated area like that, and from 2 miles away, other Bigfoot researchers are going to hear you, and they're going to call back. And now you guys are just talking to each other, and both groups are going to go back and put on their website, oh, look, we caught these calls. And again, I'm not saying what they caught was not Bigfoot, because I don't know, but you don't know, and that's concerning to me. And I also think it's a matter of, the old phrase, your focus determines your reality. You go out to a cabin in the woods, and if you're searching for Bigfoot and something bangs on the side of the cabin, holy shit, that was Bigfoot. Bigfoot's outside my cabin trying to get in.
Yeah.
If you're a ghost hunter and you're in this very same cabin in these very same woods, and you hear that same bang on the side, you're not thinking Bigfoot. You're like, oh, it's a demon or it's a poltergeist. If you're out there looking for UFOs, you're like, oh shit, like maybe some aliens landed and they're trying to come abduct me.
Right.
And if you're not into any of this stuff, you're probably like, oh, a bear's trying to get in, trying to get my food, So it's if you're not seeing what's happening, I think it's very dangerous to just automatically jump to it's Bigfoot, it's a ghost, it's an alien, it's Mothman, whatever it is, because if that's what you're looking for, that's what you're going to find. Like you said, you go out to the woods and every broken tree, oh, that's Bigfoot. And it's sometimes trees just break. Sometimes trees fall. Sometimes, it's not always what you're looking for that caused it.
And it's funny because we live in a dead end street right in our neighborhood here, and we're rural. We're surrounded by farmland, little patches of woods. I mean, we're not out in the country by any means, but we're not in the city. So at the very end of our dead end street, it goes into a patch of woods, which everyone now would call a forest. All right, everything is the forest now. Okay, it's not woods. That drives me nuts. Forest. Anyway, right behind the dead end sign is probably, I'm going to say, at least 15 foot, if it was erect, small pine.
Okay.
It's looped over, it's bent over, and it's held down. I never walked into the woods to actually investigate it. It's looped over, it's bent over. It's not snow load. It's not anything natural. I know Bigfoot didn't do it. At least I'm pretty sure it did, because then again, I didn't see him not do it. But I could say if there was any other investigator would see that and go, oh God, Bigfoot here. And it's just, we laugh because every time we go down there, my wife and I usually take a walk every night with our dog. We go down to the end of the street, turn around, come back, and we always look for boogers every night. Nothing in there. You know, my wife go, it's awful. It's too, the birds are singing too much. There's no Bigfoot in here because it would be quiet, you know. But we always see that. And we've been down there in the fall through the spring, you know, spring, summer, and fall, and that thing was bent over. Looks like long before we got here. But if that, I just chuckled to myself because I can just imagine if somebody, you know, if someone else seen that was interested, you know, that's definitely a Bigfoot sign right there.
Right.
You know, and I'm sure somebody somewhere in the past few years, even before we lived here, twisted that thing over for whatever reason, but it's a perfect bow. It's like you see on everything. The thing is absolutely perfect. But I'm pretty sure, again, it's not a Bigfoot that did that. But we still giggle about it, and that's our Bigfoot tree. And you know, it's just our own little evidence, so to speak. You know.
Yeah. And you know, and I have no problem with people noticing stuff in the woods or wherever, you know, whatever you're into. If you're into UFOs and you notice stuff in the sky, I have no problem with people sort of looking at something and saying, that's, you know, and kind of logging it for later, you know, that's fine. But I think if you're looking at a broken tree branch and you're saying, oh, that's 8 feet up, it must be Bigfoot. It's absolutely Bigfoot. I'm going to take pictures and I'm going to post them on my Facebook and like, look, you know, Bigfoot was through here. That's taking it to a whole other level, whereas instead of just looking at it and saying, oh, that's interesting. Look, we've had no snow load. We've had no, like, it's weird that a branch would just be broken like that. There's no other broken branches. Like, it's no snow load anytime recently. And it's a fresh break, like, you know, but it could have been people. But, you know, it's fine to say, hey, I'm going to take note of that as you're walking through the woods. But I think if you're just going to automatically be like, there's proof of Bigfoot, there's proof that Bigfoot was through here, that gets a little,
it gets old real quick. Yeah. I mean, we've all, you just watch. And another thing that really, it gets me, I just don't understand it, is the fact that, you see these researchers, and most of them, any of these shows, you know, Expedition Bigfoot, now that cast there, you got Mariah Mayer or whatever. Now they're all of a sudden Bigfoot experts. All right. Half of those guys are just, you know, unemployed actors, you know, survivalist, ex-military, because he was in the, you know, the National Guard, or the, you know, the Weekend Warriors for 2 years. Now he's ex-military, you know, and they can smell, and they can, you know, the moss is growing on this side of the tree, and the wouldn't be if a Bigfoot was, you know, blah blah blah. And they're all out there, and wherever they are, they're tiptoeing through the woods, and they're it's like quiet. Well, if there is these things are there, they already know you're there.
Right.
Go out, if you're out there, act normal. I'm not saying do what the, you know, what finding Bigfoot guys, you know, and have the disco balls and the fireworks and the rave and all that stuff. But don't go out there and whisper like you're on a covert operation, because the majority of your sightings come from people who are out there just acting normal, camping, fishing, hiking, whatever they're doing, talking like we are, listening to music, whatever. Why all of a sudden you have to sit there and tiptoe through everything?
Right.
If they're there, they know you're there. They've known you're there, and they're probably laughing at you because the chances are, because now you're not acting normal. A human in the woods tiptoeing, that's hunting, right? The animals know that. I mean, and especially something that's supposed to be as you know, smart, I guess, as these things, you know. Just go out and act normal. Walk like you would, talk like you would. If you got a little radio, whatever you do, act normal. Don't sit there and think you're on a, you know, that you're you know, covert operation undercover, because it's just foolish. You know, I mean, really, you know, and you see all these, you get out there, you know, they're crawling on their bellies, or they're tiptoeing through the woods, and they're all whispering, and, you know, they have their hands over their face like this. And it's like, come on. It's you know, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is, most of that stuff is, they should just put it out. It's for entertainment purposes only, because it's for ratings. These guys aren't real. I can tell you a half dozen researchers right now that would be far better than anything they've ever had on TV. That would, you know, that would be able to go out there, and I'm not going to say find something, but at least show what they know, and let you know if the things had been there, currently there, or whatever. You know,
Exactly.
it's just like I know two people that I have met that I know that I would call credible. And they're the only two people that I know that have had sightings. The first being up in Whitehall, Brian Goslin of the was it 76, 77 Whitehall Bigfoot sighting up there, and he was
Yeah.
one of the policemen.
Hmm.
I met him, talked to him. His stepman's story hasn't changed in 40 plus years. He tells the same story like it is, like today. You know, that cost him credibility, probably cost him his job. You know,
Hmm.
he drives around now in a, you know, a later model pickup truck, and he does his thing and does his investigating. He didn't get rich off it. He had
Right.
nothing to gain after all these years, you know, and that's what got me. After Seth, they did their first Minerva Monster, then they did the Beast of Whitehall.
Hmm.
And I talked with Brian Goslin after Seth had done that shoot, and they had actually had Brian was out. They did a Finding Bigfoot up there, and he said that was a joke.
Oh, I'm sure.
Crew. It was 100% joke, and he would tell you right now. He goes, he loved how Seth, what they did. You know how he handled himself, how they did the show and everything, and just, you know, he had a lot of respect. But you know, that man's sighting, he hasn't changed. He'll tell you exactly what happened. Yeah, you had 7 total law enforcement officers with their eyes on this thing.
Yeah.
You know, and his story hasn't changed in all these years. Just a credible, good guy, no nonsense. You know, head down. He could make up 1,000 other stories if he wanted to. You know why? You know,
Right.
and just honest. And then the second one, I got to start watching his videos on YouTube, and he goes by the name. His YouTube channel is Red Chun, John Red Chun.
Oh yeah, you told me
And
about him.
yeah, and it just so happened to be I ended up messaging him because his accent sounded familiar, and come to find out, he lives about, I don't know, 20 miles from where my wife grew up in southwestern PA, right on the
Oh, okay.
Ohio border. And when we went down, matter of fact, a few years ago to visit my wife's family, we spent the night spent an evening. He took us out to dinner. We went over to his place, and he took us to a couple of his research areas,
Oh, nice.
and you know, told me his story. And just knowing him like I do, and he's so low key, and he, you know, he's like we are. It's not Bigfoot until it is. I mean, he'll
Right.
even tell you that. He'll make no claim whatsoever. But story that he had, you know, was just, you know, not extraordinary, nothing fantastic. He had done work, the job he was doing at the time. He was working evenings, and he had some time to hunt after his shift in the morning, and he went out hunting. He was, you know, just propped up just next to a tree, and he seen this thing go by, and it looked like the Geico caveman. It wasn't ape looking. It looked human,
Wow.
and it wasn't massive like, you know, like Patty or, you know, that type of thing. It was more NBA player-ish, you know,
Hmm.
kind of mongoloid looking face, you know, like monster, and thing was not pretty whatsoever,
Wow.
you know. And he thought that he couldn't believe what he was seeing at first, and knew what it wasn't, you know,
Yeah.
couldn't say what it was. And he ended up backtracking. He goes, I got it now. He goes, it's going to come out right. Well, it never did come back out. Never did ever see it again, you know. But here's a guy right there tell his story exactly how it is. But he's, you know, he's not out there preaching the word about it or anything. So he's since done his research, you know, and post a few things on. He doesn't post a whole lot over the, but he still is out just about every weekend down, you know, in the southwest, you know, like Chestnut Ridge.
Right.
A lot
Right.
about that, you
Hmm.
know, and that stuff. He's down in that area, so he's involved with a lot of the researchers, you know, down there.
Yeah.
So those are the two that I personally know that I would vouch for.
Hmm.
You know, these guys have no reason to lie.
Yeah, definitely.
You know.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's interesting you talk about the techniques, because, you know, when I went out with Josh the first few times, you know, I blogged about it, and you know, the title of the articles was, you know, Bigfoot hunting in the Adirondacks, and you know, people would ask me like, well, you know, what'd you do? Did you do tree knocks? Did you do yells? Did you? And I was like, no, we went camping.
Yeah,
We did nothing to
right.
actively, you know, like my thing was like, if we walk through a muddy area, I'm kind of looking down, and, you know,
Sure.
do I see any footprints, or, you know, you're laying in the tent at night and you're kind of listening. But for the most part, we went up there, you know, we're chopping wood, we're putting up our tents, we're talking around the campfire, we're cooking our meals. There was no active Bigfoot hunting at all. Like we didn't
Right.
do tree knocks. We don't, because I agree with you. I think, if you're, these things already know you're there if you're
Yeah.
in the woods, and your best chance of catching one of them, because like you said, most of these witness accounts are people hiking, people hunting, people just going camping, people out for a
Ordinary
picnic,
people doing
ordinary
ordinary
people,
stuff. Yeah.
right? Just doing ordinary things. They're not out there looking, how many stories do you hear of someone who was actually, I mean, maybe aside from, Patterson and Gimlin, how many people do you hear are out there actually looking for Bigfoot and actually find it?
Right.
It's people finding like, the tree structures or the broken branch, and oh, I found, we found evidence of Bigfoot because you were looking for it. If you're looking to, it's confirmation bias. You're like, oh, Bigfoot's in this area. And oh, look, there's a broken tree branch. There's our proof.
Right.
I much prefer these stories of people who never had an interest in Bigfoot, are not looking for Bigfoot, and yet they turn a corner and there's one, in the distance, or there's one
Right.
crossing the road, or there's one, they come out of their tent to pee at 3 a.m. and there's something,
Oh yeah.
in the trees across from them, and they're like, what the hell is that? That to me is much more credible than the people who are like, I went out searching all weekend and I found a broken tree branch and there's my proof.
Right. And there's so much more to the Patterson Gimlin deal than the film. There's years before that people, I don't know, I guess people's most thing, Patterson Gimlin, they loaded the horses off the trailer road for a little bit and there was Patty and the rest is history.
Right.
But to listen to, to know the whole story, the years that Patterson put into that and the people that were involved before that, and finding the tracks and finding all that up in the Bluff Creek area, and the history of Jerry Crew finding the first, track, and where the term Bigfoot was coined, and what all went into that leading up to Patterson Gimlin being out there, and how long they were out there, and the stories, you hear the whole story leading up to that and what got them there, and how it happened, and that was just 100% chance
Right.
that it happened. I still believe that that's the Holy Grail. I mean, until it's proven wrong, you're proven a hoax or proven not a Bigfoot. That right there, I believe, is still to this day the Holy Grail of what we're going to get. Maybe just because it, who knows? Maybe these things can sense, modern technology, the infrared, the sound stuff that we can't hear. And he was out there with just, at the right place at the right time with the old type of 8mm, or what was it? I can't remember, something like that. I mean, they were at the right place, but they didn't just go out there one day saying, let's go look for Bigfoot and found Patty. There's years that went into this, and before that, and building up to that. And they were there in the area for a reason. Okay, because there was a lot of other people that aren't known, that aren't really associated in the everyday story of that, I mean, you're going back to, John Green, Renee DeHinden, all those guys, Bob Titmus, there's just so many of them that were all involved, in that particular time.
Right.
From in the 50s, when they were building the roads and everything up there to what led them to Bluff Creek and everything else. It's an incredible story of the history of that, that, which I obviously, I'm not going to plug Will Jevning, but I guess I am in a way, but there's just so much. I mean, this man's done so much, trying to bring to the fore the history of it all. And it's not just what we see on TV, the Patterson Gimlin film. That's not the end all. I mean, there's so much huge story that went into that, and years and years and years of research that got him to that point.
Yeah. And, the thing that's interesting to me too, is that, Patterson went to his deathbed saying this was real.
Sure.
And Bob Gimlin is still, and he's not a millionaire. This is not a guy who's making tons of money. He goes to conventions. I'm sure he gets paid.
He does, but you heard that story, I guess, when you've heard of Doug Hychek, I'm sure. Because he's the one, the creator of Monster Quest.
Yeah,
which I thought was a pretty darn good joke, for all the years that they did that,
Oh yeah, definitely.
He actually sat down with Bob Gimlin, and they had the whatever television, whatever production company, whatever. They finally said to him, give him $1 million and just say it's a hoax.
Right.
And we'll end it right here. And they offered him $1 million. Just tell us right here, you'll never have to worry again. Just say it's a hoax, and you can slip off into anonymity, and you'll live the rest of your life comfortably. And he goes, I don't want to take your money. He goes, because I have no reason to lie. And
Right.
just watch. I mean, I don't know Bob Gimlin, but just you see him. He's the down to earth, and like you said, he does the conventions and everything, but he sure isn't rich. And he
No,
knows,
no. I mean, he's getting. I mean, if he's lucky, he's getting. I mean, top end maybe a couple $1,000s for each convention he's going to.
I mean, heck, he could have said, "Okay, it's a hoax," taking the $1 million, and still, lied about being a hoax. If he wanted to.
But years ago, he could have sold the rights to his story. It could have been books and movies, and
well, that's another thing. Talking about the rights, because Patterson, again, there's so much to that story, with the film and the original copy and everything else. And Bob Gimlin basically got screwed out of a lot of the majority of, if not all, of the royalties,
right,
everything that came from that. He ended up getting nothing. Patterson's wife and the lawyers and blah 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 and this and that. Again, so much to that story that everybody doesn't know, and you kind of feel bad for Gimlin, because he's paid the price over the years for this, and you don't know if, he's probably happy that he's in part, but it's also been a curse to him.
Oh, definitely,
a big curse.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's interesting to me that when people who can sort of, because that's what the skeptics will say. Oh, he's doing this to go to the convention. He's doing this for fame and fortune. And it's like, well, he's not that famous. He's not Brad Pitt. He's very famous in a very small circle.
Right.
And he's not making a ton of money. He's probably making enough to live off of. He's probably making a decent amount, but just to sell the rights to his story, he'd get millions of dollars, and he'd be set for life, and his family would be set. And he's like you said, he's holding steadfast.
And he could have been set years ago. You know what I mean? Now you think of it. I mean, as old as he is, it's not as easy to get around and go to all these conventions across the country and everything.
Exactly.
He's not. He's an older man now.
Yeah.
And that stuff gets old real quick. Again, like I said, kind of can be a curse as well.
Definitely.
But
so how did you get into Bigfoot? Because you're like, I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I'm kind of into all the UFOs and ghosts and Mothman and Bigfoot.
I find all of it. I love the ghost stuff. I love the UFO stuff. I don't really do the Dogman stuff. You know what I mean? One cryptid's enough for me. I mean, you got Dogman, Dogman, Lizard Man, Mothman, Goat Man. There's you name it, they've got it. But and it's funny because just like me, like so many people that you hear talk to, it was a legend of Boggy Creek. My aunt had taken me to see that back when it came out in the local theater, in the mid 70s, and it scared the bejesus right out of me. Okay, obviously there was a Patty film too, but I think it was Boggy Creek, because they were showing the Patterson film there as previews, before the movies then.
Right.
And it was Boggy Creek, and that just wound me right up, and all through a kid, living out in the country. I'd sleep with the covers over my head, and I was the Bigfoot kid, and then you get older in school, and then it's sports and girls, and then after that, then it's family, and just happened to be my oldest son's birthday, and I can't tell you what birthday it was. He was still young, maybe 8-9 years old, something like that. It was around his birthday time, and I seen in the bargain bin the Legend of Boggy Creek on DVD, and I went, oh shit. Now I hadn't forgot all about Bigfoot. I've always kept it in the back of my mind and would read whatever articles came out, but I wasn't as an enthusiast like I was in a kid and like I am now. But I ended up getting that movie for my son, and it kind of got me back into it. It kind of sparked the fire a little bit more. And then of course now we have the internet now too.
Yeah.
So I can your stuff is limitless. It's at the push of a button. You can find anything. And as that went on, again, my kids thought it was the great stuff when they were little. My kids grew up, went through high school, sports, girls now, and now I'm a grandfather. And after my kids kind of, one by one they left the nest, I really stayed. The interest just, I just find it fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm a big thing now. I don't watch any news. I can't stand the world we live. The world's on fire right now.
Exactly.
I don't like it. I don't have any news. My wife and I, unless it's something that's really huge and it comes up like on a news feed or something, major headlines, I don't even know what's going on, because every day it's just pure shit. And,
Oh, yeah.
and I just, there's nothing good about it. Every day it's just worse. We're living in one of the worst states in the country right now, because this is just a crumbling ball of crapola. It really is. If I could be a miserable hermit and live by my, live out in the middle of nowhere with just my wife and dog, I'd be happy. I'm good with that. But that's it. It's just nice to kind of escape and, find something that I can enjoy. We were huge sports fans. I mean, huge sports fans. My wife originally from Pittsburgh, being a Pittsburgh Steelers, Pirates, and all that. I had NFL season tickets for 18 years in New England as a Patriot fan since '76.
Nice. My wife will love that.
Yeah, we were, it was always, if the game wasn't on TV, it's on the radio. And then the past few years, just the way the world's turned and politics have got into sports, we haven't watched a professional game in probably going on 3 years right now.
Yeah.
Because it's no longer about the game. It's not, and so I've immersed myself in this even more than I was before, into pretty much just this. Every night, if I have something to listen to, fall asleep to, it's going to be Bigfoot. And if it's not Bigfoot, well, then I'll do the UFO or ghost thing, because I'm interested. There's a bunch of podcasts that I really enjoy. Well, I can't say a bunch, because I've really dwindled that down to just a small handful. But I still enjoy listening to Bigfoot stories, even if they don't have to be true.
Right.
I mean, as long as there's some truth to the story that it could be, not a lot of the outlandish, portal hopping, mind speaking, UFO riding, Nephilim, all that stuff. But
right.
Because there's a podcast that we listen to, it's called Dixie Cryptid. And his name's Cam Buckner, down south Mississippi, I think, or somewhere down south. He does a podcast, and he comes right out and says, "I'm not a Bigfoot researcher. I don't even know if they're true," but he goes, "I love telling stories." And he's just a great voice to listen to on YouTube. And he does a bunch of stuff. He has a fictional character that he's writing. His name's Steve Lilly, and he's a Bigfoot hunter paid by the government. And you listen to this stuff, and you can say, that could really be happening. And he tells you he made it up, but it's still, it's absolutely awesome. If you ever, you're bored, whatever, go on YouTube, type in Dixie Cryptid, start from the beginning.
Listened to his show a few times.
Yeah, he's just, he's right out there just telling you. He goes, "I don't even know if Bigfoot's true." He goes, I enjoy the subject. He goes, "I don't know if I believe it or not," but he'll tell you right up, these are stories. I'm not pushing them. These aren't fact. Some of them, he goes, he'll read what, like a lot of them are written, sent in by listeners or whatever. He goes, and I don't pretend to say any of it's true.
Right.
So the next one I listened to, and I've listened to these guys for a long time. Have you heard of Kerry Arnold?
No.
Okay. He had probably the most intense Bigfoot experience that I've ever heard in my life. I heard it first time back when I used to listen to Sasquatch Chronicles. He was a guest of Wes's years ago on there, and his story was just like, whoa. I'm telling you what, that was something. And this guy's legit as well, in my opinion.
Okay.
Well, he has his own podcast now, and it's called Bigfoot Odyssey.
Okay.
He's teamed up with Mark Zasky, who does a lot of research down in Everglades, down in South Florida, after the things down there. If you can get by Mark Zasky himself, because he's a screwball. I mean, but you listen to Kerry Arnold, and again, he's not out there trying to prove, because avid hunter, had a horrible experience, sold all his stuff.
Wow.
Quit hunting, whatever. The bottom line is, his whole goal isn't to prove that these things are real. He wants people to know that these things are out there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. He's not saying don't go camping, don't go fishing, don't go hiking. But his biggest point is just to make people aware that these things are out there. And for whatever reason, a whole other topic is why the government, I believe they know it's there. I mean, believe me, the government knows everything. There's no way they don't know it's there. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist guy by any means at all. I truly believe that they know these things are out there. But, you get a chance to listen to Kerry Arnold's, if you get a chance to listen to his encounter, and you follow him as much as I have these past few years, You know, he just seems like just a good guy. He's a good old Southern boy, and what what he went through, and to this day, he'll tell you he still wakes up sweating in the middle of the night from the encounter that he had.
Wow.
And just everybody, these aren't. I'm not saying that these things are all bloodthirsty killers. Okay, they are not. Repeat, not your furry forest friends of the giants and
Right.
the big brother or whatever you want to call them. The new one I heard, what's the name of? They got a new name for them. That some group has called them. They're the big. Oh, can you remember the name? But it's a relatively new name that folks have coined the phrase that they're the overlookers of the forest and this and that, and they're not to be trusted. You wouldn't go pat a grizzly bear on the head and offer it a cupcake. You certainly wouldn't do it with one of these things either.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Because people want to attribute, they're peaceful and they're human-like and.
Sabe, that's it. Sabe. Sabe.
Okay.
Sabe knows what you're thinking, and that's there you go. That's the next beautiful part to this story.
Yeah, but I mean, if they exist, like you said, they're if they're an animal, like you said, you wouldn't go. Grizzly bears may look cute, and I mean, here in New York, we have black bear, and they're relatively harmless. I mean, you yell loud enough, they're going to run off. They're scavengers. They're not really going to attack you unless they're with their cubs. That being said, if you see one and it's not running from you, you're not going to go up to it and be like, "Hi, bear."
Exactly.
Let's roll around on the ground and play. And Bigfoot should not be treated the same way.
Right. And I just think that's just it's just getting the awareness out there. Even if you don't have to believe. I don't mind skeptics. There's a difference between the skeptics and just non-believers. You know what I mean? Because I agree with the skeptics. Why do we have no bones? Why can't you get a picture? I agree with that. Why can't we?
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that skeptical attitude. You get someone, because obviously, everybody knows my interest with this, and there's a few of them that just laugh at me, but I don't press it. I don't, try to, force anything down their throat. They know what they know that I'm interested in it, but I do have another handful that will send me little things that I may have missed, a article from here or a sighting from here, knowing that I'm, and I would say most of the people that I'm associated with, are like, they're in the camp of, there's just too much evidence to say that they don't exist. Not enough to say they do, but too much to say they don't as well.
Right. And yeah, I think even the term skeptical has gotten twisted over the years, where to be skeptical usually means you doubt it. It doesn't mean you discounted it. And I think nowadays skeptics are just kind of like, there's no way in hell that this creature exists. Whereas I consider myself more of a traditional skeptic, where I'm sort of, if I look at something, I'm saying, okay, we found a footprint, or we found a tree, break. Let's look at this clearly and scientifically and logically, and let's try to eliminate all other possibilities. And that's what being skeptical should be about. It shouldn't be about just dismissing it and saying, no, everybody who's ever seen a Bigfoot is lying, or misinterpreted something, or they were drunk, or they were high. That to me is just dismissive. That's not skeptical. I think being skeptical is having the open mind, but also just not accepting everything at face value. You can't just say, oh, there's a footprint on the ground, it's definitely Bigfoot. No, maybe it's a bear that stepped in its own track. Maybe it's a hoax. Maybe it's just the way the ground is, and I've seen so many things where people are like, oh, look, there's a footprint, and it's just a vague sort of wearing of the ground and some moss, and they're like, because it looks like a footprint, so it must be a footprint. And it's like, well, you take your boot and do that, and you're not making a footprint. So
and it's like the shows that you see, they'll show it, but they have to put the red line around it, and then once they put the red line around it, oh, now I see it. The toes and everything else. But take the red line away, and it don't look like anything.
Exactly. And if you need a red line or an arrow, or you got to spend 6 hours in editing software to kind of bring out the highlights and so that people can see it, then it's not there. You're seeing something and you're manipulating it so that other people can see it or hear it. It's not there.
And just like my buddy who lives down, in southwestern PA. Same thing. And when we went down to visit him, because he had his YouTube channel for this was 2015, and he had his YouTube channel for long before that. And he was showing me stuff that's like subscribers or whatever. And he's so no nonsense, just like we are. You know what I mean? It's just, he, feet are on the ground, these aren't magical, mystical, any of this, that, and he never claims whatever he's put out there, he'll tell you right out. He goes, this probably isn't, here's what I saw. Okay.
Right.
But he had this picture that someone had blown up taken a screenshot of one of his YouTube videos. Okay. Mailed it to him. And there was like 15 red circles where there was all these Bigfoot. I mean, he was just dying. I mean, he's going, he goes, this is a glamorous job, isn't it? He goes, look what I missed. And he showed us this. And it was blown up to like a portrait or like a small poster form that someone had sent in. And there was 10, 15 circles of a screenshot that all had, there you go. Well, if that's the case, mystery solved, on to the next.
Right.
Yeah. So he was just telling me, he goes, this is what you have to deal with on the flip side of that,
Yeah. And again, it's your focus determines your reality. If you're going to look at a photo of the woods, and there's going to be dark areas, there's going to be lighter areas. If you're going to look into every dark area and every little amorphous blob looks like a face to you, and you're going to be like, there's a Bigfoot, and there's a Bigfoot, and there's another Bigfoot.
Yeah.
It's nothing. You're seeing stuff that isn't there because you want to see it.
There was, when I was first really getting into it back in, I would say 2010, 12. And then when I was really getting, like full-time enthusiast into it, there was a YouTube channel that I watched that at the time I thought it wasn't, I can't say that he didn't do a nice job, but it was, but I've since over the years, I don't even subscribe to it anymore, because he'll go out and he just walks his woods. He's in Ontario, somewhere in the woods in Ontario. And it doesn't matter. Every video he has, and I mean every single one, you read the comments, and at 7:32, I see a Bigfoot. At 11:57, there's a Bigfoot behind a tree. At 13:56, you can see a female Sasquatch with a baby on the hip. And it's just like, all these people see Bigfoot in every single. And if that's the case, well, then problem solved. Mystery solved. There you go.
Yep. And it's funny because I did an experiment years ago in my ghost hunting group. We did an investigation at this place on Staten Island called Snug Harbor. It was an old retirement home for sailors back in like the 1800s, and supposedly haunted. And we did an investigation, and my wife had taken a picture of one of the houses that's supposed to be haunted. Nothing was in the photo. It was just a photo of the house, just, for the website. Like, hey, here's, a picture of a spooky house. So I went into Photoshop. I drew a little red circle over a shadowy area in the photo, and I posted it on Facebook with no caption, no comments. Just, here's a photo with a red circle. Comments. I see a little girl. I see an old man. And finally I had to tell people, like, no, this is just a random photo of a house. And I circled a random shadowy area in the photo. It was taken at night, and people were arguing with me. They're like, no, you caught something. And I'm like, no, there's nothing there. I could have circled anywhere else on this photo and you would have seen something. And they're like, no, I see a little girl. I see a dog. I see a man holding a baby. I have to go back and read the comments, but it was just ridiculous how many people were freaking out. Yeah. And just like, oh my God, great catch. For nothing. It was a total psychological experiment, and it worked.
Well, my buddy down there did the same thing. He took and because he was getting real sour to the fact of everything. That's why he doesn't post a lot of stuff anymore, but he's still, he has the FLIR, he has all the equipment, and he's, the probably the most professional researcher that I personally know, that goes out, boots on the ground every chance he gets. But he had done that once. Because he got to the point where he was getting mail sent to him, and everybody was a Bigfoot behind every tree. And he took a picture of there was a little lot in his town, in his city, Burger King, and there was a patch of woods. Literally measured in yards. You know what I mean? And he took a picture, and the comments that came up, that there were all the Bigfoot that they seen in there. And then he goes, folks, I'm sorry. I just did a little experiment. He goes, there's no Bigfoot. He goes, this is probably 200 200 feet wide by 200 feet deep patch of woods, and you've got a Walmart, a Burger King, a Rite Aid, and there's no way, you know. And
Yeah.
he goes, thank you for, you know, validating my experiment,
Right.
you know. And he didn't even say, can you see the Bigfoot in the picture? You know what I mean? He just kind of put it up just as a Pavlov's dog kind of thing, I guess, and
Yeah.
prove the
Yeah.
point. People see what they're going to see.
Exactly.
You know, and that's just because even, you know, there's so much stuff that we watch, and you know, and there it is right there, and I don't see nothing. I mean, but then again, I'm old, so what do I know? You know.
Yeah, but again, it's if people want to see it, they're going to see it. And you know, there's legitimate photos out there that are interesting.
Sure.
I don't mean legitimate. I mean, like, you can, you know, someone can post a photo and you're like, I totally see what you're seeing.
Right.
What it is, I don't know, but I
Right.
see what you're trying to get across to us. But then there's other photos, like I said, where it's just a photo of the woods.
Right.
And then people like, oh, I see a baby Bigfoot over here, and then there's a juvenile over here, and then I see a silverback over here. And I'm like,
yeah,
it's trees. It's trees. There's nothing there.
well, that's the same thing, because, you know, and a lot of these, because you know that a lot of the websites are flooded with, I guess you can say, pareidolia, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But I wonder how many of them are real, because you got to, on the flip side of that, it's just so easy to, you know, it's just as easy as it is to say that's a hoax. Come on, we all know that. But then I've seen ones that, yeah, you know, I mean, it maybe probably is, but at the same time, it could be real. You know what I mean? That, how do I know? You know, I mean, the benefit of the doubt, there's been quite a few that, you know, that I know the backstory to it. And is it, I don't know, you know, but there's a lot of times, because also in this business, you know, someone will, it's just got to the point where, with no matter what anybody puts up, it's going to be a hoax, right? And they're going to get just slammed, you know.
Mhm.
And a lot of time, rightfully so, they should, for putting the crap up, you know. But you know, with the amount that's out there, some of that could be legit. A few of them out of 100 or 1,000 could really be legit. You know what I mean?
Okay, thanks for joining us for part one. We're going to end this episode right here. Scott and I ended up talking for a lot longer than I thought we would, which is great. And we still didn't touch on everything I wanted to. One thing we didn't really get a chance to talk about was this Bigfoot skull nonsense from Coyote Peterson. Sadly, that all happened while we were recording the episode last Tuesday. So we recorded for 2 hours. We talked a little bit before, a little bit after, off air. And once I stopped recording and I went to Facebook, I started seeing all this stuff about a gorilla skull or a primate skull. A lot of people thought it was a Bigfoot skull found in British Columbia. Turns out it was just Coyote Peterson doing a stunt, basically a what if situation. And he admitted it like the next day, but that night people were going nuts about Bigfoot. I did a little analysis video of it. You can find that on our YouTube channel. So please, go check that out. It's kind of a moot point now, but cool video. And we'll see you next week with more of Scott Perry. Thanks for listening.